1165 Beechwood Boulevard sits empty now. Grass, asphalt, the ordinary geometry of a Pittsburgh suburb. Nothing here suggests what stood on this ground for 53 years. Lyndhurst rose in 1887. Gothic revival, designed by Theophilus Chandler, the architect who founded the University of Pennsylvania's Department of Architecture. Elaborate ironwork traced the roofline. Stained glass filtered afternoon light into colors that had no names in ordinary language. The entrance hall held tapestries shipped from Europe, woven centuries before Pittsburgh existed. William Thor commissioned it. He had built his fortune systematically canals first, then railroads, finally steamships carrying cargo and passengers across the Atlantic. The Red Star Line, the first steamship company connecting America to Europe, answered to him. By 1889, his estate measured somewhere between $12 and $40 million. The sources disagree on the precise figure. They agree he ranked among the 100 wealthiest men in the country. The mansion completed in August of that year. William died in Paris that same month, 70 years old. He had created a monument to permanence and lived in it hardly at all. His widow, Mary Copley Thor, moved into the Gothic palace with their children. The youngest son, Harry, was 18, subject to tantrums, insomnia, fits of incoherent babbling. His prep school teachers had described an erratic zigzag walk that seemed to mirror his thoughts. But he was heir to $40 million, and in 1889, money solved most problems. It would not solve this one. On June 25, 1906, Harry Kendall Thor walked into the rooftop theater of Madison Square Garden and shot a man 3 times in the face. The victim was Stanford White, one of America's most celebrated architects. The murder happened in front of hundreds of witnesses. The trial became a global spectacle. The legal fees mounted, and Mary Thor, watching from Lyndhurst, eventually understood the palace her husband built to last forever would have to be sold. The fortune that seemed infinite had limits after all. This is the story of how one murder trial destroyed one of Pittsburgh's most prominent families, and why, today, nothing remains at 1165 Beechwood Boulevard but memory. Chapter 1. The Iron Rivers. Pittsburgh in 1842, smoke, rivers, barges, heavy with coal. The Allegheny and Monongahela converge to form the Ohio, and along these arteries moves the raw material of American industry, iron ore, limestone, timber cut from forests that seem infinite. The city smells of burning coal and possibility. William Thor understands rivers. Born here, October 12, 1818, son of a banker who brought Philadelphia capital west to establish the Bank of Pennsylvania's Pittsburgh branch. Educated at Western University of Pennsylvania, the institution that will become the University of Pittsburgh, though no one calls it that yet. At 24, William sees what others miss: the canal system connecting Pittsburgh to the Ohio River represents the future, until it doesn't. 1842, William and his brother-in-law, Thomas Shields Clark, form Clark and Thor. They operate steam-powered boats on the Pennsylvania and Ohio Canal, 83 miles of engineered water, 57 locks lifting cargo 454 feet in elevation. Each boat carries 45 to 60 tons coal descending to foundries, iron ascending to factories, passengers crushed between crates, paying passage because canal boats move faster than walking. The business prospers. But William watches the railroads laying track parallel to the canals, and he understands obsolescence before it arrives. 1846 through 54, the divestment. William sells the canal operation at its peak value, before the market comprehends what the railroads will do. He reinvests in what's replacing him: large shareholdings in the Pennsylvania Railroad, the steel rails that will strangle the canals he once operated. By 1870, he serves as first vice president of the Pennsylvania Company, managing all western routes of the Pennsylvania Railroad. Capital compounds, investments multiply. But William sees past railroads too. Rails move cargo to ports. What carries it across oceans? 1873, the Red Star Line, the first steamship company connecting the United States to Europe, and William Thaw serves as its president. Now his empire spans 3 transportation revolutions canals to railroads to transatlantic shipping. Cargo that began on a canal boat in Pittsburgh might end in Liverpool or Antwerp, and Thaw interests touch every leg of the journey. The wealth accumulates in ways that defy ordinary comprehension. A small town in Illinois, platted November 1871, takes the name Thawville in his honor. William owns controlling interest in the Gilman, Clinton and Springfield Railroad that serves it. He visits once, in February of 1874 or 75. The sources disagree, and never returns. Towns can be named after you and forgotten in the same motion. By the 1880s, William Thaw funds the Allegheny Observatory, which astronomers rank among the 10 finest in the world. He endows science fellowships at Harvard and Princeton. He gives generously to Third Presbyterian Church in Pittsburgh, where the congregation knows him as a pillar of moral rectitude and Christian charity. The ironies of this will emerge later. 1889. William Thaw's estate measures between $12 and $40 million. The sources cannot agree. The fortune too vast for precise accounting. He ranks among the 100 wealthiest men in America. Lower-class workers earn $500 annually. A lavish dinner at Delmonico's costs $1.50. William's annual income exceeds what most families will earn across generations. He has built an empire, rails and ships and capital flows. He believes, as men of his position always believe, that this will outlast him. That wealth of this magnitude constitutes permanence. And so, in 1887, he commissions his monument. Chapter 2. The Gothic Monument, 1165 Beechwood Boulevard, Squirrel Hill, Pittsburgh's most prestigious suburb, where the city's industrial aristocracy builds estates to match their fortunes: the Carnegies, the Mellons, the Fricks, families whose names will define American capitalism. William Thaw selects his architect carefully: Theophilus Parsons, Chandler Jr., founder of the Department of Architecture at the University of Pennsylvania. A man who married into the DuPont family and understands how old money speaks through stone and glass. Chandler works in Gothic revival, the style that suggests European ancestry even when none exists, that evokes cathedrals and permanence and dynasties measured in centuries rather than decades. Construction begins in 1887. The ironwork elaborate, custom forged, tracing patterns along the roofline that catch light and shadow in equal measure. The stained glass panels shipped from Europe, colors ground from minerals that no longer have commercial sources: cobalt blue, vermilion, a green that appears almost black in certain light, almost gold in others. The entrance hall receives tapestries woven in the 16th century, threads holding images of hunts and harvests from a world that predates Pittsburgh itself. Gothic revival means pointed arches, verticality, the eye drawn upward as in a church. It means stone that looks ancient even when freshly cut. Lyndhurst rises through 1887 and 88, taking shape as the physical embodiment of William's conviction that he has built something beyond time. The neighborhood watches. Squirrel Hill's elite understand the statement being made. This is not merely a house. This is a declaration that the Thors belong among families whose wealth spans generations, even though William earned his fortune in a single lifetime. The mansion says we were always here. We will always remain. William's daughter Margaret, born January 9, 1877, will marry George Lauder Carnegie in 1898, Andrew Carnegie's nephew, the absolute pinnacle of American industrial society. The wedding will happen at Third Presbyterian Church, where William serves as a devoted member. The Thors are not merely rich, they move among the richest, and Lyndhurst proves it. August 1889. The mansion completes. Workers install the final stained glass panel. Servants arrange the tapestries. The Gothic palace stands ready to receive its owner. William Thor sails for Paris. Business, perhaps, or pleasure. The sources don't specify his purpose. What they record is this August 17, 1889. Paris. William Thor dies, 70 years old, heart failure or stroke, or one of a dozen ailments that kill wealthy men who believed their money made them invincible. He had commissioned Lyndhurst as his legacy. He barely inhabited it. The body returns to Pittsburgh. The funeral draws the city's elite to Lyndhurst's Gothic halls, where they pay respect in rooms William scarcely saw. He is buried in Allegheny Cemetery. The will is read. The estate $12 to $40 million, depending on which accounting proves correct, among the 100 wealthiest men in America, and he died before enjoying what he built. Mary Copley Thor, his widow, moves into the mansion with their 5 children from this second marriage, plus William's 5 children from his first. The Gothic palace designed for a dynasty now houses a widow and a complicated family tree. The youngest son, Harry Kendall Thor, is 18 years old. Mary has plans for Lyndhurst. She envisions decades here, perhaps generations, grandchildren in these halls. The Thor name carried forward in Squirrel Hill society. But she also has plans for Theophilus Chandler. The same architect who built Lyndhurst will, in 1897, receive another commission from Mary Thor. She will fund construction of Third Presbyterian Church, the congregation where her late husband worshipped. The church will take 6 years to complete, opening in 1903. Pittsburgh will nickname it Mrs. Thor's Chocolate Church for its brownstone color. The church will still stand in the 21st century at 5701 Fifth Avenue, a testament to Mary's piety and architectural taste. Lyndhurst will be demolished in the early 1940s. The monument to God endures. The monument to family does not. But in 1889, Mary cannot know this. She moves into the Gothic palace as its mistress, her children arranged around her, the future appearing secure. Chapter 3. The Damaged Heir. The baby born the year before Harry died smothered. Accidental death in infancy. Pressed too close to Mary's breast while lying in her bed. The sources record this plainly, without elaboration. A brother Harry never met, whose death marked the family before Harry drew his first breath. February 12, 1871. Harry Kendall Thor, born in Allegheny City, now part of Pittsburgh, the second son of William Thor's second marriage to Mary Sibbett Copley, born 1843. History of insanity on Mary's side of the family. The genealogical records note, Mary herself known for abuse of the servants, episodes of ungovernable temper that ripple through the household. The help knows to avoid her on certain days, when her mood turns and rationality departs. Harry inherits this. insomnia from early childhood, nights when sleep refuses him and he wanders Lyndhurst's Gothic halls, a small figure casting long shadows, tantrums that escalate beyond childhood frustration into something servants recognize as different, incoherent babbling, baby talk that persists past the age when other children master language. He will carry this speech pattern into adulthood, reverting to childish pronunciation when agitated, his chosen amusement weaponizing the household, heavy objects, vases, candlesticks, books bound in leather that predate American independence, become projectiles aimed at servants' heads. He throws with intent. The staff learns to watch his hands, his eyes, to recognize the moment before violence and move. Not everyone moves quickly enough. The misfortune of others brings fits of giggling. A servant falls, a dog struck by a carriage, news of distant tragedy. Harry's laughter emerges high-pitched, involuntary, unconnected to humor as others understand it. The sound makes people step back. Private schools in Pittsburgh try and fail. Harry bounces from one institution to another, never doing well. Teachers writing careful notes to William and Mary that dance around the truth. Your son is unintelligent and a troublemaker. At Worcester Preparatory, a teacher observes the 16-year-old Harry's erratic zigzag walk. Later, the teacher will testify that this gait seemed to involuntarily mimic his brain patterns, thoughts ricocheting, unable to travel in straight lines. William sees this, understands, perhaps, what his youngest son is. The will, written before William sails for Paris, includes specific provisions for Harry. A trust, monthly allowances of $2,500 substantial wealth, but structured to prevent Harry from destroying himself with unlimited access. Lower-class workers earn $500 yearly. Harry's monthly allowance equals 5 years of a laborer's wage, but it's controlled, metered. William's final attempt to protect his son from his son. 1889. William dies in Paris. Harry is 18. The University of Pittsburgh admits him, trading on the Thor name and the late William's generous donations. Harry transfers to Harvard, using social status and family wealth to bypass standards that would exclude him on merit. At Harvard, he studies poker, lights cigars with $100 bills to impress classmates who understand this gesture means nothing to him. The money regenerates faster than he can burn it. Drinking binges, cockfights organized in dormitories, intimidating students and teachers with the implicit threat of family lawyers and family money. Harvard expels him. Immoral practices, the official record states. 3 hours to pack and leave. The details remain sealed, but the speed of expulsion suggests something beyond ordinary misbehavior. Harry returns to Lyndhurst and his mother, Mary, alone in the Gothic mansion, making decisions William anticipated and tried to prevent. The will's structure, the monthly allowance. The trust was William's voice from beyond death, warning Mary what would happen if she unleashed their son. Mary doesn't listen, cannot listen, perhaps, doesn't believe, or refuses to believe that her youngest child represents the danger William saw. After William's death, Mary increases Harry's allowance from $2,500 to $8,000 monthly, $96,000 annually. In today's currency, over $3 million, and Harry remains heir to approximately $40 million of the total estate. The last restraint is gone. William died in Paris, and with him died the only force that understood what needed to be contained. Harry is 22 years old, free, wealthy beyond comprehension, and subject to fits of giggling when others suffer. He leaves Pittsburgh for Europe. What happens there will establish patterns that money can suppress but not eliminate. Outrage, lawyers, payoffs, silence. The cycle will repeat for 11 years, until June 25, 1906, when Harry commits murder in front of hundreds of witnesses who cannot be paid to forget what they saw. Chapter 4. The Money That Couldn't Save Him. August 1889. Lyndhurst Gothic halls receive mourners. Pittsburgh's elite file through rooms where tapestries absorb sound and stained glass transforms afternoon light into something unearthly. William Thor's casket rests beneath pointed arches that suggest cathedral solemnity. The congregation of Third Presbyterian Church attends. Business partners from the Pennsylvania Railroad, investors in the Red Star Line, men whose fortunes measure in the millions, gathered to honor one of the 100 wealthiest Americans. Mary Copley Thor stands in black, her children arranged beside her. Harry, 18, displays no visible emotion. The giggling fits that emerge at others' misfortune remain suppressed, or perhaps death registers differently in his fractured cognition. The will reads in Lyndhurst Library weeks later: lawyers, family, the accounting of an empire. $12 to $40 million. The sources cannot agree which figure comes closer to truth. For Harry, $3 million direct inheritance, accessible at age 22. In today's currency, $105 million, structured carefully. Monthly allowances of $2,500, not lump sums that could be squandered in spectacular fashion. William's will speaks from death, warning Mary what will happen if Harry receives unlimited access. The monthly sum exceeds what most families earn in 5 years, but it's controlled, metered. William understood his son in ways Mary refuses to accept. She overrules him. After William's burial in Allegheny Cemetery, after the mourners depart and Lyndhurst settles into its new rhythm as a widow's house, Mary makes her decision. She increases Harry's allowance from $2,500 to $8,000 monthly, $96,000 annually. In contemporary terms, over $3 million each year, adjusted for inflation. A cadre of lawyers stands ready, not to constrain Harry, but to shield him. Monetary payoffs become the customary method of assuring silence. Whatever Harry does, however he offends, wealth provides the solution. Outrage, then lawyers, then money, then silence. The pattern establishes itself. Harry sails for Europe, 22 years old, expelled from Harvard, freed from his father's restraint, funded by his mother's denial. Distance from America encourages him to try every whim. Paris, 1895. Harry rents an entire hotel floor, throws a party for himself and 25 women actresses and prostitutes. Beauty the only qualification. The cost, $50,000, equivalent to $2 million today. Wide publicity follows. Parisian newspapers cover it. The story crosses the Atlantic, but nothing happens, no consequences. Money absorbs scandal. The pattern repeats. Brothels across Europe, restraints, handcuffs, whips, young women harmed, then compensated. The lawyers follow at a distance, checkbooks ready. Harry's patterns of violence establish themselves across multiple countries, with money ensuring silence. The lawyers follow at a distance, checkbooks ready. The amounts vary thousands, sometimes tens of thousands. One woman receives $7,000 for injuries sustained in a New York apartment Harry rented under a false name. The madam who owned the building, Susan Merrill, will later testify that Harry brought over 100 girls to 2 separate locations between 1902 and 1905. She caught him lashing them with whips. Money kept her silent until it couldn't. Mary knows, must know. The lawyers report to her. The bills pass through Thor family accounts, but knowing and believing constitute different acts. Harry is her youngest son, born into wealth that should protect him from consequence. She built Third Presbyterian Church between 1897 and 1903, 6 years of construction, her monument to God and Christian virtue. She cannot reconcile that project with the reports arriving from Europe, so she doesn't. She increases his allowance again, signs the checks, authorizes the lawyers, maintains the fiction that this is manageable, that money can solve what it enables. 11 years, 1895 to 1906. The cycle continues. Harry offends. Lawyers intervene. Money silences. Harry offends again. He believes himself invincible. Wealth has always made consequences disappear. Until June 25, 1906, when he commits murder in front of hundreds of witnesses who cannot be paid to forget what they saw. Chapter 5. The Architect and the Girl. The man Harry will murder was born 32 years before him. Stanford White, born 1853, trained under Henry Hobson Richardson, the greatest American architect of his generation. By the 1880s, White has partnered with Charles Follen McKim and William Rutherford Mead to form the firm that will define American architecture's Gilded Age. McKim, Mead, and White. Their buildings, Madison Square Garden, completed 1891. The Washington Square Arch, 1891. Madison Square Presbyterian Church, 1906. The firm works in Beaux-Arts classicism, creating structures that speak of European grandeur translated to American ambition. White handles the residential commission's mansions for Vanderbilts, Astors, families whose wealth rivals the Thors. He designs with extravagance. No detail too small for attention. No material too expensive to source. He travels to Europe annually, purchasing antiques, paintings, sometimes entire rooms that he ships to New York and installs in clients' homes. He lives the life his buildings suggest: parties, beautiful women, excess contained by genius. December 1900. A girl named Florence Evelyn Nesbit arrives in New York City. 15 years old, family destitute after her father's death. She becomes a model because her face sells. Photographers recognize something beyond ordinary beauty. Gertrude Kaiserbier photographs her. Charles Dana Gibson draws her, establishing Evelyn as the Gibson girl, the visual ideal of American femininity. Her image appears in magazines, advertisements, on postcards sold by the thousands. America's first supermodel, though the term doesn't exist yet. PBS will later call her America's first bona fide sex goddess. At 15, 16, she embodies what wealthy men want and cannot quite possess. Stanford White meets her through theatre connections. Evelyn has transitioned from modeling to the stage, performing in Florodora, a musical that makes her a minor celebrity. White, 47 years old, sees her and arranges an introduction. His apartment on West 24th Street, entrance next to the back delivery door of the FAO Schwartz toy store. Multi-floor space filled with treasures from European buying trips. He invites Evelyn and her friend for lunch. The meal extravagant. Afterward, White leads them 2 flights up to a room decorated in forest green, illuminated by concealed lighting that makes everything feel underwater, dreamlike. Suspended from the ceiling, a swing. Red velvet ropes trailed with green smilax vines. Evelyn will later describe it as a gorgeous swing with red velvet ropes around which trailed green smilax, set high in the ceiling. White says, "Let's put this little kid in the swing." Evelyn jumps on. White pushes. She swings higher, higher, until her feet kick a paper parasol hanging from the ceiling. The 4 of them, Evelyn, her friend, White, his associate, Reginald Ronalds, play spontaneous games involving the swing. Sometimes Evelyn wears clothes, sometimes not. The sources agree on the swing's existence. What happened on it remains disputed. Evelyn will later testify that on another visit, when her mother had left town, White gave her champagne. She lost consciousness. She woke in White's bed with evidence. She later testified that she had been assaulted. She was 16. He was 47. This testimony will electrify a courtroom in 1907. But years later, in her autobiography, Evelyn will recant. The story will change. The truth, whatever it was, dies with both of them. What's certain, White becomes Evelyn's patron, pays her bills, her mother's bills, arranges music lessons, brings books. He calls it mentorship. Others call it something else. And then Harry Thor sees her. The Wild Rose, a theatrical production. Harry attends 40 performances, sitting in the audience, watching Evelyn. Obsessive attention that anyone backstage notices. He arranges an introduction through an intermediary, calling himself Mr. Monroe. False name, though the deception doesn't last. Eventually, he reveals, I am Henry Kendall Thor of Pittsburgh. The name means money. Evelyn understands this. Stanford White warns her generalizations about Thor's instability. No specifics about the violence. White knows Harry from New York society, dismisses him as the Pennsylvania Pug, a reference to Thor's baby-faced features. White considers him a poseur, a clown, someone of no consequence. Fatal underestimation. Never ignore obsession. Harry pursues Evelyn for nearly 4 years. Gifts, money, attention that borders on worship. Evelyn, craving financial stability. Knowing her beauty will fade and the Gibson girl cannot last forever, begins to consider him. White's warnings lack details. Harry's money speaks louder, and Evelyn, at 19, cannot imagine what Harry plans to do to the man who, in Harry's fractured mind, stole what belonged to him. 3 lives converging. The architect, the girl, the heir, White building monuments, Evelyn selling her image, Harry watching, obsessing, planning. The red velvet swing hangs in White's apartment, waiting to become the symbol of the century's most sensational trial. Chapter 6. Schloss Katzenstein, April 4, 1905. 3rd Presbyterian Church, Shadyside, Pittsburgh. The building Mary Thor funded, designed by the same architect who built Lyndhurst, Gothic revival in brownstone, already nicknamed Mrs. Thor's Chocolate Church. Mary watches her son marry Evelyn Nesbit in a private ceremony. Witnesses, family, the minimum required. Evelyn, craving financial stability, ignores Thor's tenuous grasp on reality, or believes she can manage it. Harry, 34, has pursued her obsessively. She is 20. The math alone suggests disaster. They move into Lyndhurst, the large, depressing mansion where Mary rules. Evelyn will later describe the household as ruled by the sanctimonious propriety of Mother Thor. The Thors, in Evelyn's assessment, are anything but intellectuals. Their value system was shallow and self-serving. Harry enters his mother's sphere of influence without protest. The Gothic halls where he threw objects at servants as a child now contain his wife, and Mary's control extends over both. But Harry has developed new obsessions. He institutes a zealous campaign to expose Stanford White. Letters to Anthony Comstock, the moral crusader who polices vice in New York. Harry believes White leads a conspiracy, becomes convinced that members of the Monk Eastman gang hired by White plan to kill him. Paranoid delusion, but Harry cannot distinguish delusion from reality. He starts carrying a gun, spring 1906. Harry takes Evelyn to Europe. They travel to Austria, to Schloss Katzenstein in the Tyrol, a forbidding Gothic structure sitting near a high mountaintop, isolated, reachable only by difficult roads. Harry rents the entire castle, 3 servants, butler, cook, maid segregated at one end. Harry and Evelyn quartered at the opposite end, removed from anyone who might hear. The first night, Evelyn locked in her room. Harry arrives in a violent rage. He carries a leather riding crop. What follows is a 2-week pattern of assault, physical and sexual, while he screams about Stanford White. This continues for 2 weeks. The servants, distant in their quarters, hear nothing or choose to hear nothing. Evelyn, isolated in a castle on a mountain, has no escape. The man she married for financial stability has become something else entirely violent, obsessed, convinced that hurting her somehow addresses what White did years before. After 2 weeks, it stops. Harry becomes apologetic, incongruously, given what just transpired. He enters an upbeat mood, the psychological pattern established in childhood tantrum, violence, then cheerful as if nothing occurred, now applied to his wife in an Austrian castle. They return to America. Evelyn says nothing. The money, perhaps, or shame. Or the simple fact that in 1906, wives have few options when husbands turn violent. Harry's paranoia intensifies. He believes White's gang stalks him. The gun stays in his pocket. He writes more letters to Comstock, framing White as moral threat to American womanhood. Comstock, who crusades against obscenity, takes the letters seriously, but nothing happens. White, unaware of Harry's vendetta, continues his architectural practice, his parties, his life. White has never taken Harry seriously. The Pennsylvania pug, baby-faced, rich, unstable, but ultimately harmless. A poser of little consequence, a clown. On June 25, 1906, Harry and Evelyn will be in New York briefly before sailing to Europe. The weather will be unbearably hot. Harry will wear a long black overcoat over his tuxedo despite the heat, concealing the revolver he now carries everywhere. Stanford White has no idea he has 11 weeks to live. Chapter 7. The Rooftop Theatre, June 25, 1906. Morning. Stanford White's office on Fifth Avenue, where architectural drawings for Madison Square Presbyterian Church await his approval. The church nears completion, his design, high Renaissance style, a dome over a cubical central space. It will open in October. He will not see it. The day's plan: take the late train to Philadelphia. Business requiring his attention. But his son, Lawrence, comes down from Harvard unexpectedly. 19 years old, visiting his father in the city. Stanford postpones Philadelphia, spends the day with Lawrence instead. They have dinner together. Father and son, conversation across a table, the ordinary intimacy of family. Afterward, Stanford mentions the premiere at Madison Square Garden's Rooftop Theatre, Mam'selle Champagne, a new musical. The theatre sits atop the building Stanford designed 15 years earlier, in 1891. His masterpiece, some say. The tower rises 320 feet, visible across Manhattan, defining the skyline. Lawrence encourages him to go. The show should be amusing. Stanford agrees. He will attend, briefly. The weather is unbearable, suffocating heat that persists into evening, but the rooftop theatre catches breezes unavailable at street level. Harry and Evelyn Thor spend the day in their hotel. They are in New York, briefly, boarding a luxury liner for Europe in days. The European trip planned, tickets purchased, but tonight, theatre. Harry has secured seats for himself, Evelyn, and 2 male friends. The heat oppresses everyone. Men loosen collars, women fan themselves, seeking relief that refuses to arrive. Harry dresses carefully, tuxedo. Then over it, despite the temperature, a long black overcoat, floor-length, unseasonable, conspicuous. Evelyn asks why he needs a coat in this weather. Harry says nothing, refuses to remove it. Beneath the fabric, a revolver. The rooftop theatre fills as evening arrives. Madison Square Garden's crown, open to whatever air moves across Manhattan. The premiere draws society, theatre enthusiasts, people seeking entertainment in the crushing heat. The show begins. Mamselle Champagne Light Musical Fair, forgettable except for what will happen during its finale. 11 o'clock, the show nearing its end. Stanford White arrives alone, takes his customary table, the one always reserved for him in the building he designed. He sits within view of the stage, within view of Harry Thor. Harry has been watching the entrance, sees White arrive, the recognition immediate, the man who, in Harry's fractured understanding, ruined Evelyn, who leads the conspiracy against him, who sends gangs to murder him. Paranoid delusion crystallized into the figure now sitting 30 feet away. The finale begins. The cast sings I Could Love a Million Girls. Voices, orchestra, the ordinary sounds of musical theatre. Harry stands, moves through the crowd. The long black coat makes him visible. Strange, a dark figure crossing the rooftop in suffocating heat. He reaches White's table. Stanford looks up, perhaps recognizing the Pennsylvania pug, the baby-faced heir he dismissed as inconsequential. Their eyes meet. Harry draws the revolver. 11:05, 3 shots. The first proves fatal. White dies instantly. The powder burns obscure his features. He falls forward as witnesses realize what they've seen. The orchestra stops. Silence. Then screaming. The audience doesn't comprehend immediately. Some believe it's part of the show. Theatrical violence staged for entertainment. Then they see White's face, or what remains of it. An understanding arrives. Harry stands over the body, still holding the revolver. A fireman on duty at the garden moves first, disarms him. A police officer arrives, takes Harry by the arm. Harry offers no resistance, smiles, even, euphoric. To the officer, I killed him because he ruined my wife. To Evelyn, who has pushed through the crowd, it's all right. I probably saved your life. Evelyn stares at her husband. The man she married for financial security has just committed murder in front of hundreds of witnesses. She says nothing. What words exist for this moment? The police lead Harry away. He goes willingly, still smiling. The crowd parts, behind them. Stanford White's body cools beneath the open sky of the rooftop theatre he designed. The building he created now the site of his death. Lawrence White will spend the rest of his life haunted by a single thought, if only his father had gone to Philadelphia. The unexpected visit, the postponed trip, the decision to attend the premiere, each choice leading inexorably to 11:05 on June 25th. By morning, the story will reach every newspaper in America. By week's end, Europe will know. The murder of Stanford White by Harry Kendall Thor will become the trial of the century, though the 20th century has barely begun, and many trials remain. But tonight, the rooftop theatre empties. Police photograph the scene. Witnesses give statements, voices shaking. White's body is removed, covered, transported. Blood remains on the table, the floor, evidence of what money and obsession produce when they collide. Harry Thor, in police custody, hears voices, young girls calling to him, heavenly and approving, divine confirmation that he has done right, eliminated evil, defended womanhood. The voices are real to him, more real than the corpse he created, the witnesses who watched, the legal machinery now grinding into motion. He believes he will be celebrated. America will understand. The public will applaud the man who rid the world of Stanford White's menace. He is wrong about what the verdict means. Not guilty will not mean freedom. But 7 months wrong about celebration newspapers will sell millions of copies covering his trials, and crowds will gather wherever he appears. Not approval, exactly, but fascination. The spectacle of wealth destroying itself in public, which Americans have always found irresistible. Chapter 8. The Brass Bed, the Tombs Prison, New York City, Cell 220, Murderer's Row. Harry Kendall Thor, searched upon arrival. Police inventory $125 in paper money. $2.36 in coin. 2 silk handkerchiefs, 2 gold pencils, a gold watch, and a small pocket combination mirror case. They book him initially as John Smith, though cards in his pocket read Harry Kendall Thor, Pittsburgh. The formal charge first-degree murder. Bail denied. The prosecution argues that witnesses number in the hundreds. The crime occurred in public. Flight risk exists given family wealth. Harry will await trial in the Tombs. Cell 220 receives him. Other prisoners sleep on iron cots bolted to walls, eat prison food delivered on tin trays, wear uniforms that erase individual identity, rendering all inmates identical in grey fabric and shame. Harry Thor sleeps in a brass bed, custom frame, mattress softer than prison issue, linens changed daily. He wears his own clothes, custom-tailored suits, silk shirts, the wardrobe of a millionaire maintained in a cell designed for criminals. Meals arrive from Delmonico's restaurant, Manhattan's finest dining. Waiters in formal dress carry covered dishes through Murderer's Row to Cell 220, where Harry dines on squab and champagne. The jail doctor approves a daily ration of champagne and wine. Medical necessity. The paperwork claims. Harry's delicate constitution requires it. Newspaper photographers capture this. The New York Times runs images Harry seated at a formal table setting. Crystal glasses, china plates, food that costs more than most prisoners' families earn in weeks. The caption notes his treatment in no way differed from that ordinarily meted out to men in his position. The claim is obscene. Men in his position, wealthy, connected, able to purchase accommodation from institutions meant to impose equality, receive treatment that mocks justice's premise. The brass bed and Delmonico's menu prove what everyone knows: wealth corrupts every system it touches, and American justice bends for money. Harry's mental state in custody, euphoric. He hears voices, young girls calling to him, heavenly and approving. Divine confirmation that murdering Stanford White was righteous. The voices comfort him, tell him the public will applaud his actions, recognize him as defender of womanhood, champion against moral corruption. He believes this completely. Unshakable conviction that America will celebrate him. The trial, in his understanding, will vindicate the murder. Jurors will recognize what he did as necessary, even heroic. 3 days after the shooting, a grand jury indicts Harry Kendall Thor for murder. Trial date, January 23, 1907. 7 months away. 7 months in the Tombs. Sleeping in brass. Dining on Delmonico's. Hearing voices that assure him of righteousness. Other prisoners watch this. Men who sleep on iron, eat prison food, wear grey uniforms, understand that justice operates differently depending on bank balances. The contrast could not be starker. Cell 220 versus every other cell on Murderer's Row. Money buying comfort in a place designed to strip it away. If wealth could purchase a brass bed in the tombs, what could it buy in the courtroom? The answer will emerge across 2 trials, months of testimony, and legal fees that will ultimately force Mary Thor to sell Lyndhurst. But in June of 1906, Harry cannot imagine this. He reclines on brass, sips champagne, hears heavenly voices confirming his righteousness. The murder is behind him. The trial ahead seems manageable. His family's wealth has always solved problems. This will be no different. He is wrong. The trials will consume 2 years, generate international headlines, and establish the template for every celebrity trial that follows. But he cannot know this yet. For now, brass bed, Delmonico's, champagne, voices, and 7 months until the world watches Harry Kendall Thor's madness displayed in open court. Chapter 9. The Trial of the Century, January 23, 1907. The courtroom fills before dawn. Public banned space reserved for attorneys, reporters, illustrators for daily papers. The New York Times will report the trial to the ends of the civilized globe. Newspapers in London, Paris, Berlin cover it. America's first modern media spectacle. Celebrity and scandal and violence compressed into testimony that will run for months. The jury sequestered. First time in American jurisprudence, this restriction is ordered. The publicity surrounding the case massive, inescapable, requires isolation to prevent contamination. 12 men locked away from newspapers, families, ordinary life, while they decide if wealth and madness excuse murder. Mary Thor has primed her publicity machine. Monetary payoffs to reporters, favorable coverage purchased. The district attorney responds by hiring McChesney and Carson, a Pittsburgh public relations firm, to run a smear campaign. Headlines result: woman whose beauty spelled death and ruin. Evelyn becomes the story, not Harry, the beautiful showgirl who drove men to destruction. Harry's original attorney, Louis Delafield, wanted an insanity plea. Simple, defensible, likely successful. Harry dismissed him. Believed Delafield wanted to railroad him to Matawan as the half-crazy tool of a dissolute woman. Harry demands vindication, not mercy. He killed Stanford White righteously. The jury should recognize this. New lead counsel Delphine Delmas of San Francisco, famous for never losing a case, retained for $25,000 equivalent to $875,000 today. Delmas understands the strategy Harry wants. Make the jury hate Stanford White so intensely they forgive his murder. Put White on trial instead of Thor. For this strategy, they need Evelyn. February 7, 1907. Evelyn Nesbit. Thor takes the stand. She wears a navy blue tailored suit, a shirtwaist with a boyish collar, a black hat, dressed like a schoolgirl, not the Gibson girl whose image sells magazines. The courtroom packed with reporters, illustrators, attorneys falls silent as she begins. She describes Stanford White's apartment on West 24th Street. The forest green room with concealed lighting, the red velvet swing suspended from the ceiling, ropes trailed with green smilax. How White said, "Let's put this little kid in the swing." How she swung higher and higher until her feet kicked the paper parasol. The jury leans forward, every word recorded by stenographers, transmitted by telegraph to newspapers holding evening editions. Evelyn continues. The champagne White gave her, losing consciousness, waking naked in his bed, blood on the sheets marking what she testified was rape. She was 16, he was 47. By the time Evelyn finishes her first day of testimony, several jurors are crying. The New York Times runs verbatim transcripts. Papers in London and Paris carry the details. Appropriations hearings in Congress stop as legislators send messengers for evening editions containing Evelyn's testimony. The red velvet swing becomes iconic. Symbol of corruption. Innocence violated. The moral rot Delmas wants the jury to see in Stanford White. Whether the testimony is accurate, whether events occurred as Evelyn describes, becomes irrelevant. The jury hears the story, sees Evelyn dressed as a schoolgirl, imagines the swing, the champagne, the violated girl. April 11th, 1907. After 47 hours of deliberation, the jury returns. Deadlock. 7 vote guilty of first-degree murder. 5 vote not guilty by reason of insanity. Mistrial declared. Harry is outraged, enters fits of physical flailing and crying, cannot comprehend why the jury failed to recognize his actions as chivalrous, necessary, the defense of innocent womanhood. 7 months in the tombs, hearing heavenly voices, and the jury cannot vindicate him. Second trial, January through February. 1908, new strategy. Harry pleads temporary insanity, admits the killing, argues his mental state at the moment rendered him unable to distinguish right from wrong. The testimony Evelyn provided the rape. The violation becomes the trigger. Harry heard about White's actions and snapped, temporary madness, not permanent condition. February 1st, 1908. Verdict not guilty by reason of insanity. Harry believes he's won. The verdict exonerates him. He will go free, vindicated, celebrated as he knew he would be. Then the sentence incarceration for life at the Matawan State Hospital for the criminally insane in Fishkill, New York. Not prison asylum, not guilty, but not free, confined indefinitely, until doctors determine he's sane enough for release. Harry had not anticipated this, thought not guilty meant freedom. Instead, transfer from the tombs to Matawan, from brass bed to asylum cot, from Delmonico's to institution food. The trials are over. 2 years of testimony, 2 juries, international coverage, the red velvet swing immortalized, Stanford White's reputation destroyed posthumously, Evelyn's face on every front page, Harry confined to an asylum for the criminally insane, and Mary Thor in Lyndhurst receives the legal bills. The amounts are staggering, $25,000 to Delmas alone, additional attorneys, investigators, the publicity campaign, expert witnesses, appeals. The exact total never appears in sources, but the implication is clear. The fortune William built, the wealth that seemed infinite, has limits. Mary will eventually be forced to sell Lyndhurst to raise funds for Harry's continuing legal battles. The Gothic mansion William commissioned as a permanent family seat, the monument to dynasty and wealth, will go to strangers. The Thor name, once synonymous with Pittsburgh elite, becomes associated with scandal, murder, madness. The trials were over. The bills were just beginning. Chapter 10. Mrs. Thor's Chocolate Church, 5701 Fifth Avenue, Pittsburgh. Third Presbyterian Church stands in brownstone, Gothic revival, designed by Theophilus Chandler, the same architect who built Lyndhurst. Locals call it Mrs. Thor's Chocolate Church for the color of its stone. Mary Copley Thor paid for most of it. Construction began 1897, completed 1903. 6 years of labor, funded by a widow who believed monuments to God might balance whatever her youngest son was doing in Europe. The timeline holds irony. While Mary commissioned stained glass and stone columns, Harry tore through European brothels, whipping women who needed his money too badly to resist. While workers installed pews, where Pittsburgh's faithful would kneel. Harry hosted a $50,000 party in Paris for himself and 25 prostitutes. The church rose. Harry descended. Both projects financed by the same fortune. 1903 the church opens. Mary attends services there, sits in pews, her money built, listens to sermons about Christian virtue and moral righteousness. The irony appears lost on her, or perhaps she understands perfectly, and the church represents penance, atonement for a son she cannot control. 1906 Harry murders Stanford White. The church has stood 3 years. It will stand another century and counting. Lyndhurst will not. February 1908. Harry committed to Matawan State Hospital for the criminally insane. Not guilty by reason of insanity. Confined indefinitely. Mary believes this is temporary. Harry will be declared sane, released. The family can resume normal life. She does not yet understand what normal means for the Thors now. The legal battles begin immediately. Habeas corpus, petitions, appeals, motions to prove Harry's sanity and secure his release. Each attempt requires lawyers, expert witnesses, court filings. Each attempt costs money. July 1909. Habeas corpus hearing at Matawan. The prosecution, determined to keep Harry confined, presents damaging evidence. Susan Merrill takes the stand. She ran deluxe Manhattan brothels, the kind that cater to wealthy men seeking privacy and discretion. Between 1902 and 1905, Harry rented apartments from her at 2 separate locations, used false names, presented himself as a theatrical agent. He brought girls to these apartments, over 100. Merrill testifies, young women seeking theatrical careers, promised auditions that never materialized. What materialized, instead Harry with whips. Merrill caught him lashing girls on bare arms and bodies. The violence left evidence that required extensive cleanup. The prosecution produces physical evidence, a whip, jeweled handle, presented to the court. Reporters describe it in detail, the craftsmanship, the weight, the implications. The whip enters the record as Exhibit A in Harry's pattern of violence. Clifford Hartridge, one of Harry's own attorneys, corroborates Merrill's testimony. He handled the monetary payoffs, $30,000 total, distributed among Merrill and various women to ensure silence. One woman received $7,000 for injuries sustained in Harry's rented rooms. The petition fails. Harry returns to Matawan, but the hearing has revealed what Mary's money previously concealed. The pattern, the scope, the fact that Harry's violence predated any knowledge of Stanford White's relationship with Evelyn. The argument that White's actions triggered temporary insanity collapses when evidence shows Harry was whipping women years before he met Evelyn. The bills mount, legal fees from 2 murder trials, ongoing appeals, and petitions. Matawan charges for Harry's confinement. Mary pays from Lyndhurst. Gothic halls growing quieter as the fortune that built them drains into legal defense. The decision comes sometime between 1907 and the early 1920s. The sources cannot pinpoint the exact date, but Mary Thor, widow of one of America's 100 wealthiest men, is forced to sell Lyndhurst to raise funds for her son's legal defense. The Gothic palace William commissioned as permanent family seat. The monument to dynasty, wealth, permanence, listed for sale. The price and buyer remain unrecorded in available sources, but the transaction happens. Strangers take possession of 1165 Beechwood Boulevard. Mary leaves the mansion where she lived as William's widow, where she raised Harry and watched him destroy everything. The tapestries, the stained glass, the elaborate ironwork all belong to someone else now. the early 1940s. Lyndhurst faces demolition. The sources disagree slightly. Some say 1942, others 1944. But the outcome is consistent, complete erasure. Wrecking crews arrive. The Gothic revival architecture that took 2 years to build comes down in weeks. The stained glass shatters. The ironwork sells for scrap. The stone goes to landfill or gets repurposed in projects that will never acknowledge where it came from. Today, nothing remains at 1165 Beechwood Boulevard. Grass, asphalt, suburban ordinariness. 5701 Fifth Avenue. Third Presbyterian Church stands. The brownstone weathers well. The congregation still gathers. Mrs. Thor's Chocolate Church survived the scandal, the demolition, the decades that erased Lyndhurst. Mary built 2 monuments with the same architect, one to God, one to family. God's monument stands. The family's is gone. The fortune William built to last generations barely survived 2. The mansion he commissioned to last forever lasted 55 years. But the church Mary funded, perhaps as penance, perhaps as prayer, outlasted them all. Chapter 11. The Great Escape. August 17th, 1913. 7:30 in the morning. Mattawan State Hospital for the Criminally Insane. Fishkill, New York. An attendant opens the front gate to admit the daily milk delivery. The cart enters. Harry Kendall Thor, who has been waiting, runs out. A black Packard touring car idles nearby. 6 cylinders, powerful engine, driver ready. Harry jumps in. The car accelerates. 10 minutes later, 10 miles away at Stormville. Witnesses see the Packard traveling at 70 miles per hour. Astonishing speed for 1913, on roads designed for horses and carriages. The car races north toward the Canadian border. The escape required planning. 5 men aided Harry, including Richard J. Butler, former New York State Assemblyman. Someone coordinated their movements, financed the operation, arranged the Packard and driver. The sources believe Mary Thor orchestrated it. Years of practice extricating her son from disasters made her expert at what money could accomplish. The milk cart, the waiting car, the precise timing, these details suggest sanity, organization, forethought. Harry has been confined at Mattawan since February 1908 for being too insane to stand trial. Yet he plans and executes an international escape that requires coordination across multiple parties. The paradox will not be addressed, not by the courts, not by the doctors, not by anyone with power to resolve it. Harry crosses into Canada near Coaticook, Quebec. Canadian authorities arrest him promptly, take him to jail in Sherbrooke. Mary's lawyers arrive. They include William Louis Shirtliff, whose legal team contains a young attorney named Louis St. Laurent, future Prime Minister of Canada. The legal argument: Harry cannot be extradited. The Canadian courts must review the case. Due process requires hearings, deliberation, time. Canada disagrees. Canadian officials examine the case. American millionaire, convicted murderer, escaped from asylum for the criminally insane, attempting to use Canadian courts to avoid consequences. They want no part of this. 3 weeks after Harry's arrival, in the middle of the night, 4 police officers and an immigration inspector break into his hotel room, force him to dress, drag him to a waiting car, drive to the Vermont border, literally throw him back into the United States, but Vermont does not keep him. Harry crosses into New Hampshire before authorities there arrest him. In Concord, 2,000 people gather to greet his arrival. A local police officer observes, "One might think that a hero was in the limelight. Celebrity has replaced notoriety. Harry murdered a man in front of hundreds of witnesses, spent 5 years in an asylum, escaped international borders, and crowds treat him like royalty. He remains in New Hampshire under nominal house arrest, kept at Mount Madison House in Gorham, watched by Sheriff Holman Drew, who appears to interpret custody loosely. Harry moves relatively freely, enjoys the attention, signs autographs. The crowds keep coming. Legal wrangling continues through 1914. New Hampshire fights extradition to New York. Harry's lawyers file motions. The case reaches the United States Supreme Court, which orders New Hampshire to extradite the prisoner. December 1914. Harry returns to New York. A trial is scheduled to determine his sanity, whether he remains criminally insane or has recovered sufficiently for release. July 16, 1915. The jury determines Harry Kendall Thaw is no longer insane. 7 years after being declared too mad for prison, he is declared sane enough for freedom. The verdict releases him unconditionally. If he was insane enough to be locked up, how was he sane enough to plan an international escape involving 5 accomplices, a getaway car, and precise timing? The jury in 1915 does not answer this question. Neither do the doctors. Neither does anyone. They just set him free. Harry immediately begins divorce proceedings against Evelyn. The marriage that began in Mary's Chocolate Church, that survived murder and trials and confinement, ends in lawyers' offices. Evelyn gave birth to a son, Russell William Thaw, in October 1910. She claimed the child was Harry's, conceived during a conjugal visit to Matawan. Harry denied paternity throughout his life. The divorce finalizes. Harry, 44 years old, walks free. Wealthy still, though less so. Notorious definitely. Sane, according to legal determination. The pattern will continue. 1916. Harry will meet Frederick Gump, a 19-year-old from Kansas City. Will lure him to New York under pretense of funding a scholarship at Carnegie Institute. Will attack him with a whip at the Hotel McAlpin on Christmas Eve. Will flee to Philadelphia and attempt suicide. Will try to bribe the Gump family with $500,000 to drop charges. The bribe will fail. Harry will be declared insane again, confined to Kirkbride Asylum in Philadelphia under tight security. 7 more years in institutions. Released again in April 1924. Declared sane again. The cycle, violence, confinement, declaration of sanity, release, violence, confinement. But in 1915, newly freed, divorce pending. Harry cannot see this future. He believes the worst is behind him. The trials, the asylum, the escape all concluded. He has been vindicated, declared sane, released. America's justice system has determined that a man who murdered someone in public, who whipped over 100 women, who planned an international escape while supposedly insane, poses no further threat. The determination will prove incorrect within 16 months. Chapter 12. Allegheny Cemetery, February 22, 1947, Miami Beach, Florida. Harry Kendall Thaw dies in a rented home on the fashionable North Bay Road, 76 years old, 10 days past his birthday. Cause coronary thrombosis. The medical bulletin issued days earlier noted he was making rather slow headway due to complications, but had some chance of recovery. The chance expires on a Tuesday. Harry dies alone, or as alone as wealth allows. No wife, no children acknowledged, no friends accumulating over decades. Just staff, nurses, the mechanics of terminal illness in a rented house far from Pittsburgh. February 26, 1947. Services at H. Sampson Incorporated. 537 Neville Street, Pittsburgh, simple and private, the notices say. Only a few relatives and friends will attend. The contrast to William Thor's funeral in August 1889 is absolute. When William died in Paris, Pittsburgh's elite filled Lyndhurst's Gothic halls. Business partners, railroad investors, church congregation, families whose names defined Gilded Age wealth. The procession to Allegheny Cemetery measured in hundreds. Harry's funeral measures in dozens at most. The Thor name, once synonymous with respectability and industrial power, now carries only scandal. 68 years from William's prominence to Harry's obscurity. 2 generations erasing what one generation built. Allegheny Cemetery, Lawrenceville section of Pittsburgh. The family plot holds William, who died 1889, believing his fortune permanent. Mary, who outlived her husband by 40 years, died June 9, 1929, having watched the fortune drain into legal fees and scandal. And now Harry, the youngest son, whose madness required selling Lyndhurst to fund his defense. The monuments are Gothic revival, matching the mansion that no longer exists. Stone markers weathering in Pittsburgh winters. Names and dates recording dynasty that collapsed. Harry's will leaves Evelyn Nesbit $10,000, less than 1% of his remaining fortune. A final insult disguised as generosity. An Atlantic City newspaper receives a call. Evelyn Nesbit, 61 years old, confirming the report of Harry's death. She and Harry had not been in contact for years. The divorce, finalized 1915, severed all connection except this: his death requires her acknowledgement. Evelyn's life after the trials was, in the cemetery records phrasing, pitiful. The Gibson girl whose face sold magazines and defined beauty. The showgirl who became the center of the trial of the century. She remarried, suffered numerous stage failures, attempted suicide twice under the influence of drugs, became a nightclub hostess, tried sculpture, accepted $10,000 in 1955 for the rights to her story, the film The Girl in the Red Velvet Swing, where her trauma becomes entertainment. In 1955, she tells a newspaper, "I had always hated Thor, and I loved Stanford White." 49 years after the murder, she finally says it plainly. The trial cast her as a victim needing defense. The Red Velvet Swing testimony portrayed White as predator. But Evelyn, given decades to consider, concludes she loved the man Harry killed and hated the man who killed him. January 17, 1967. Evelyn Nesbit dies in a Santa Monica nursing home. 82 years old, outliving both men who destroyed her life. Buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, California. Far from Pittsburgh, far from New York, far from the scandal that defined her. 3 people in 3 cemeteries. Harry in Allegheny Cemetery, Pittsburgh. Evelyn in Holy Cross Cemetery, California. Stanford White in St. James Episcopal Church Graveyard, New York. The scandal that connected them outlived them all. But the mansion demolished in the early 1940s. Nothing remains at 1165 Beechwood Boulevard. The fortune drained by legal fees, institutional costs, bribes, and payoffs. What William built, Harry consumed. The dynasty William Thor's daughter Margaret married into the Carnegie family, then fled to Kenya, where she died January 9, 1942 at Kongoni Farm. 8,000 miles from Pittsburgh. The Thor name too toxic to carry in America. Madison Square Garden, where the murder occurred, was demolished in 1925. The current garden is the 4th building bearing that name, on a different location entirely. The rooftop theater where Stanford White died no longer exists, except in photographs and testimony. Third Presbyterian Church stands at 5701 Fifth Avenue. Mrs. Thor's Chocolate Church, built with the same architect who designed Lyndhurst, survives. The monument to God endures. The monument to family vanished. Allegheny Cemetery keeps its dead. The Thor family plot. Monuments weathering. Grass maintained. Visitors rare. This is what remains stone markers, dates, names. William Thor, who believed his fortune immortal. Mary Thor, who sold the palace to save the son who could not be saved. Harry Kendall Thor, who murdered genius in service of madness. The graves remain. The scandal remains. Everything else is gone.